So shall I tell you a story about the high school, the junior?
Sure.
So there was like I said, there was a big adventure mostly, and there were only few kids, but I traveled with them a lot, all over Europe actually, and they had to make their own part of the expenses they had to earn themselves. So we had a mantra for money making that we did in the classroom, and they made money and they brought it with them during the tour. And so I did something that was like, for example, sometimes we took a plane from Rome to Frankfurt at a certain point. And I asked them to study a page of geography on the plane, and they were very angry that I asked them. But the reason why I did that was that I felt, you know, studying is not, again, it doesn't have to be known at your desk officially. You just read and you open up and you let it come in and you think about what you write. And why not do that also when you're on a plane or on a train or wherever you are? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. The other big adventure that we had that was very funny actually, or special, I would say. This was junior high school year 1, so that would be grade 6. And we were studying the Greeks, and I'd written a play for them about the oracle in Delphi, which is a place in Greece where the ancient Greeks would go to, and there was this priestess, and she was sitting there in a very sacred spot, which they called the belly button of the world. And then certain smokes would come out, and then she would enter a trance state and give people their guidance, politicians and military people, give them guidance in what to, or also just private people. And so I'd written this play, and one of the girls played the part of the priestess, and then I remember we were sitting there in the classroom, and I said, what a pity we can't go to Greece and just see that place. And one of the boys was heir to an extremely rich family. I'm not going to tell their name, but they were famous in the whole world. It's like having, I don't know, Rockefeller in your classroom. And so he said, well, maybe I can ask grandma if we can use her play. I said, okay. And I gave him permission to use his cell phone. And he called his grandmother. And so we went to Greece with a private plane.
Oh my gosh.
Then we went with a bus, which they had also provided for. It was 3 hours from Athens to Delphi, and stayed there in a hotel. But so then they acted that play in the same historical place. So that that girl who did the priestess was sitting there. It couldn't be exactly the same because that ancient temple, you couldn't enter because it was too fragile, but right in front of it, she was sitting and she was saying these words, which is know thyself. And then you can go everywhere, but you won't learn anything unless you've already found it. You look for it in yourself first. So it was a very powerful moment.
Amazing. Wow. What an incredible story.
Mm.
It must have been so satisfying for you also as a teacher and a writer to be able to act that out with the children as well.
It was, and especially because it was fun and they liked it. We all liked it. So that was the most important part of it. Somehow, everybody wanted to be involved. And it took a lot of hard work, obviously, to keep it together and to make it happen. And I wasn't alone. I mean, I had wonderful colleagues. So.
How has it been for you as a teacher, but also for the EFL school there in Italy, sort of having to establish itself by itself, like not having, like, let's say, for example, there's the whole EFL community in the States, and there's many schools, and there's the established, school there. Like, how has it been just developing that sort of on your own there, or the school on its own?
We weren't on our own because in the beginning, Gori she had had her training in America, Ananda Village. She had actually done Ananda College
Okay.
for 2 years, I think, 1 or 2 years. And so she came qualified. And she had it all, she had it in her cells, so to speak. She had a natural ability to be with especially small children. And so it was all there. And she had connections, of course, with Nitai and with Irene Schulman and with Usha, Usha, who was the director of the school. There was another teacher, Chandi, and we would Skype with them regularly. And first we did that together, and then I continued to do that also. Whenever I needed help, I would write to Nitai, and they came. Nitai spent quite a lot of time with us. Irene Schumann came and spent time with us. And so we weren't isolated, absolutely.
Okay. So you've kept connection throughout the years, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the friendship, it was all up during the whole years, and then we're still friends now, even though I'm not teaching in the school anymore.
Nice. Yeah, that's the great thing about Skype and Zoom and
yeah, we had that already in this, and now we're talking about 13 years ago.
Yeah.
12, 13 years ago. And can you stop the recording for a second, because I hear
sure.
my dog is being, just a second. The person who arrived was somebody that he knows. He's a puppy.
Oh.
But he's getting bigger. He is watching the house. So, all right.
So maybe just kind of going back to the beginning, what was it that essentially or in the beginning sort of drew you to Education for Life, or what was it that attracted you to want to work with this system of education?
So I had already worked with children as a violin teacher, as a music teacher, and as an English teacher. And there was always, I mean, I think in those early years, I was a terrible violin teacher, for example. And then when I discovered more about EFL, now I know much more on how to make playing the violin work for a child. It's so difficult. But so there had always been like a joy in working with children. Then I have 2 children myself, and they were then very young. So I had divorced from their mother in 2006, I think, yes. And they were still very young. It was obviously very, very difficult. So I lived alone, and then I could become a real dad, because I could, when they were with me fully. And so I started telling them stories. They were then 5 and 6 and 8, or 5 and 7. But there were bedtime stories, and it was one story, and it went on and on and on and on for a whole year. And so that having creativity and acting and music in relation with children was already there. And then after a very dramatic moment, because I have been connected with Ananda since 1985, I met Swami Kriyananda for the first time. And then when I moved to Italy, I'm from Holland, originally from Amsterdam. And I was in my early 30s or late 20s when I moved to Italy. And there I was very active in Rome at the Ananda Rome Center. So that bond with Ananda and Swami was always very strong. And then there was a dramatic moment in my life, and I decided to move to Ananda Assisi. So I get here, and I had no idea how I was going to support my children. I had no idea. And but it was a leap of faith, you might say. And I had given up jobs and everything. And I remember that just when I decided to move here, I got a job offer in New York for an international school, with a very good salary.
Wow.
And yeah, And here I had nothing. So I'm sitting there and I hear two people speak, two of the leaders speak to each other. One was the community manager, and the other was Shivani, actually. And she is one of the founding members of this community. She's American. And all of a sudden I hear them just, I wasn't eavesdropping, but I could just hear they were talking. They were sitting like 10-meter distance from me. And so what are we going to do with the school? There are no teachers. And then she looked at me because we've been friends for a long time, Shivani, and said, "Hey, Darshan, would you like to teach in school?" And I said, "Yes." And so then I had a job and could start teaching. So it was very difficult in the beginning. You had to get to know the parents and had to get to know the families. No, it wasn't difficult. I just needed to get into that, to gain a little experience. But I think the fact that I was not alone. It was Gori was there, and the all the help we got from America. That's what made it really. It was a cooperative project. It wasn't just one person doing it. So that's how I got into it. And then once I was with the children, basically that flow already existed in my life. That when I'm with children, something starts to flow, and that's what flow learning. That's what also that's very important in education for life, that it be natural. And of course, I've made mistakes, and but I learned from them, I hope. And it was overall those 8 years very, very joyful. It was joyful. My life was very difficult for many reasons, financially and many reasons. But the fact that I was with our children all the time, it just made all the difference.
Wow, that's beautiful. Amazing. I mean, what a just change in life events of the way things could have gone and the way things went.
It was quite, and this is, I've heard from people, I mean, the richness that I have in my heart now, I don't think I would have had that if I had gone to America. I mean, if I had gotten that job. Plus the fact that I hadn't told my children about it, but when I did tell them about it, and I'd already decided not to go, they said, "No way, that would be way too far." But in my mind, I said, well, I can fly them over because I will have enough money to do that, and I can come back regularly, but it wouldn't have been the same, of course. As living here. Wow. From here to where they lived, it was about 2.5 hours by car. So I went every week.
It's amazing how life just has other plans for us sometimes, isn't it?
It does. Yeah. Yeah, and you look back, it's good to look back. I don't look back often, so I'm very happy with this interview because now I can look back and yeah, feel all the some higher power or something that's just working through circumstances, people. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful story. And in some ways I feel not jealous that you are part of a community, but I really feel that's something for myself I'm really missing right now.
For me, you are part of the community. You're part of Masada.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just miss living around other devotees. There's something very special about that, about living close to devotees or around other devotees that I miss.
I understand that fully. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can start teaching meditation and then start a little meditation. That's my job now, by the way. So.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I'm supporting meditation groups all over Europe, but also in a way in America, because I went from 2015, I think I went like every year to Dallas, Ananda Dallas, and I served there for periods like 1 month and as long as 3 months even as a minister, and I helped them. So But you can do that. I mean, we can talk about it. So if you want to do that, maybe I can help you. But sure, you will also find people who can help you in the village. And
I'll message you after the interview. I'll send you a...
okay. All right. Yeah.
But there was one thing you did mention about nature, and I wanted you to talk a bit more about that if you could. How important is the role of nature with children?
I would say fundamental. I mean, if you can have a school, well, when you have a school in the city, you have to take the children out regularly. I mean, I would say a few times a month. But where our school was, that was like completely in nature. I mean, it was like I said, it was on top of a hill, an old villa, an old house, quite big. And then around it was just a lot of just meadows where they could play soccer and hide and seek and climb trees. And sometimes, no, not sometimes, actually quite often, I would just, you know, for example, a history class, let's say, and this was then second high school, junior high school. So we would go to, I would say, okay, we're going for a walk. And so we went for a walk, and we said, let's sit here. We sat in a circle. I said, I'm going to tell you now what I know about this particular historic thing, and I'm asking you to listen, okay? And then when we walk back, we keep silence, because I would like you to think about it. And then when we're back in school, you can just tell me what you remember. And so, or I asked them to do mental math while we were having a walk. I would just give them difficult multiplications, and they had to do it while we were walking. And then whenever they were ready, they could come to me and come with the solution if I knew it myself. But yeah. So, and another something that I remember was actually extremely powerful. So there's also a lot of wildlife here. And at a certain point, sometimes you would see animals from the school. Just look outside, so you would see a hare or a deer. And there was this beautiful deer, and he went up, and there were hunters around. So there are always, Italians are very passionate hunters. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom. All of a sudden I hear, oh. And so I came back into the classroom, and the children were standing on the balcony, and they were chanting Om to this deer to protect it against the hunters. That was an amazing, yeah, when I saw that, my God.
Oh, wow.
So I think fresh air is important, extremely important, and just, you know, nature. When there was snow, sometimes there was a lot of snow, and I remember they could all bring their sleighs with them. Sleighs, is that what you call them? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could come, you know, and during recreation, they could go all the way down, and they went like with, you know, dazzling speed down the hill with their sleighs. And I think it's fundamental, nature, because it just nurtures the soul, of course, but it's also good for the nervous system. And whatever emotional issues children may wrestle with, you know, it definitely helps when you're surrounded by trees and fresh air and silence. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I could imagine for, you know, teachers working in cities, at schools in cities, it could be quite difficult, but, you know, there's always a way to get outside, even just around one tree or a little patch of grass or...
I think so. I know. I mean, there are lots of EFL schools that are in cities.
Yeah.
I've visited most of them in America. So I visited Palo Alto. I visited Seattle. I don't think Seattle exists anymore, unfortunately. And then Portland, and of course the village. Well, the village is outdoors, but there's always an opportunity to just go out, whether it be a park or you take them on a tour, on a school trip. And you do that regularly. But even Palo Alto, I don't think it's that far from the ocean. And the ocean, you know, that's mighty, that's powerful. So I don't know if they do that, because I actually interviewed Kshama, and I'll send you that link as well. She's the
great.
director of the high school there. And I interviewed Irene, so I interviewed all my old friends. And so, but the ocean there is nearby, and that's very good too, you know. And also, of course, walking, just taking walks. Or I remember we went on a school trip to the Netherlands. It was easy for me, obviously, because, you know, I could put them up in my sister's house. And then we would rent bicycles, and we went to one of the isles and just go on a bicycle, and, you know, pretty intense. But the whole thing of nature, I think when you go to school and you have nature, you're blessed. It's definitely part of the game. You know, part of the problem is already solved. We have children, we have them in nature. In a city, it's more difficult. But most schools, I mean, my school that I went to in Amsterdam, that was the first Montessori school. So Maria Montessori was Italian, and then she got into trouble with the fascist regime in Italy, and she came to Holland, and then she adopted that country. And she started schools there. And so I went to the first school, and I remember my teacher who had known Maria Montessori passed away, I think, in the 50s. And but she had known her and studied with her. And when I had her, she was already an elderly lady. But she was so also about nature and about mushrooms, finding mushrooms in the woods, and different plants. And so and that school was in the city, but somehow we would just go and also plant crops. I remember we did that. And I think it's just you just involve the children and in nature and anything, and everything changes. They would go, our children in school would also help in the woods. We had service projects. They had to stack wood and things like that. So it was a very rich and happy and joyful, you know, experience.
Wow, what an amazing experience you got to have. I'm
Yeah,
sure that's deeply ingrained in you.
it is. It's coming up now as I'm talking to you.
Yeah,
There's
that's
another
so
thing
beautiful.
yeah, so there's another thing that is good with EFL when you're on a spiritual path, I think, that you have to be very honest with yourself. So in other words, you know, if you have a strong spiritual vibration from the past, and maybe you've been in, you know, I don't know, renunciation, and been maybe in past lives in monasteries or whatever, and then you get into Ananda and you become a disciple of a great master, and what can happen is that you develop that people are not quite honest with themselves about where they really are with their emotions, so how they feel, in other words. And so they create like a fake spiritual, I mean, it's a bit strong, but a fake spirituality. And you can't do that when you're with children. They look through it. And so after I left the school, I got some more teachers training to teach meditation. I'd already done that before, but now I got with Shivani a lot of extra Raja Yoga training, teachers training. And so I noticed that now when I travel and I teach, that you know, that inner attitude of being a child myself in a way, or being honest emotionally with myself, that stays. And so, and people can feel that. People, you know, it's not only children, people can also feel that, and they learn much more if they feel that the person who's standing in front of them is not someone who's trying to be something that he just isn't. And so it's very good for personal growth to be an EFL teacher, I think.
Yeah, it is humbling being with children, isn't it? They're so real and so honest, and they can see right through everything.
They can, and you know, of course, we don't teach like, it's difficult. It was difficult. You couldn't ask children to really do long meditations, but we created moments of silence in the classroom. And one time, I remember at the end of the day, I just says, let's finish the day in silence. And so I did a little guidance, like sit upright, straight spine, and let's do some deep breathing. And then we had 5 minutes meditation. And I said, after that, I felt like, you know, this is just as much worth as much as going to the temple here that we have and meditate for an hour or 2 hours. And 5 minutes with our children was just as powerful, if not more powerful.
Wow. That's such a good reminder, especially, you know, when you're a parent, it's almost impossible to find an hour anymore to sit and meditate, you know.
Yeah. I am going to develop meditation for parents. I've been teaching that. So that's my connection with EFL. I've kept it a little bit, of course. I'm not involved in school efforts here. I couldn't, just no time. And it's also not my dharma anymore right now. But I am developing, I'm helping the families here, a little bit part of a team that helps the families here. And I'm also developing, and I taught that also, I think, in Dallas, like how to integrate a little 5-minute meditation when you're a busy mom or a busy dad. So
yeah, that would be very helpful for a lot of people.
I think when your children are small, you just have to accept that you can't do that much, and then they are your meditation. And, but when they get a little bit older, you're still, you know, you have a house to run, and okay. No, you asked the questions. I was going to ask you questions.
No, you go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So where in the Philippines do you live?
Right now we're on an island called Palawan. It's a smaller island, and it's where my husband's family is from. So.
So is it like in a city or in a village or in nature? Or?
We're literally right beside the ocean. It's actually a very small town. It was quite populated before the whole, you know, March lockdown and everything happened. A lot of people went back to their original countries. Like there was a lot of foreigners living here before. But now it's just sort of a quiet little fishing village, and I don't even know what the population here is, but it's pretty small. It's probably under 1,000 or so.
Sounds very good. Sounds really good.
Yeah, it is.
We have a friend in Thailand. He lives near, it's not the Philippines, of course, but just to tell you, and he's really actively, he's more Ananda, he's Thai. He's more connected with Ananda Europe than with Ananda India. He's always with us, and he comes here to do teachers training, and whenever there's something online, he's with us. And he's trying to start like an Ananda center somewhere outside Bangkok. It's not impossible. I'm just saying it's not impossible.
Of course.
Now. I don't know how long you're planning to stay there.
Well, we were living here. Well, how about we end the interview and I can just tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So was there anything else you wanted to talk about as far as EFL or?
Well, so the most challenging part for me was sometimes, not always, was the building good relationship with the parents. So whenever you are, this is something that I wanted to say, and it's something that I think Usha writes somewhere in her book. But you, so you can be so enamored with your job with children that you neglect the communication with the parents, and you fail to see when some form of negative energy is building up. So you have to be really proactive, really take good care of that relationship, make communication with the parents one of your priorities. I think that's very important. That's something that I learned a little bit late, but I know it now. So that's one of the challenges that I had, and that I would say you can prevent it or diminish it by just being just as intuitive with the parents as you are with the children, and make sure that that there is clarity, and sometimes you have to stand firm, sometimes you have to listen. It should be a joint thing, something that the parents and the teachers work together to serve the growth of the child. That's very, very important. And then just to close with a nice memory, that there was one child in our school, and he had a difficult history. There had been abuse, and he often manifested a lot of heavy energy, like aggressive and heavy, just like. But when you go to the highest octave of being with children, is that you have to learn. Yes, so we learn, and we are committed to helping them in their overall development, body, heart, mind, and then also the soul. So what I remember with this child, I prayed for the child, obviously, and everybody did. But there was one moment, so we could this was an Ananda school, and we could pray together for others. And so I just remember one moment where he was sitting, and I was guiding them in praying for other people, and we did that particular method where you send out Om, and you energize your hands, and you chant Om, and then we did that, and it was particularly sincere and deep. And so I looked at his face, and I could see just a whole glow on his face. The color usually was quite pale because there was so much heavy energy in his heart, but this time he was, the color had come back to his face, and he was a whole glow, and he had his hands naturally together in this prayerful mudra. And so I felt, as long as, and this was a child who was also difficult for me personally. The mother was difficult, they didn't like me, so I had to overcome that. But then I remember one of the things that definitely helped me to stand, to keep above that personal dislike stuff, was that particular moment. I could just see a child, and he's a soul. So prayer, I think, for your children, of course, for parents for their children, but also teachers for their children, can also be a very, very important tool.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a beautiful way to look at it, a beautiful perspective.
Yeah. It helped me, it helped me to see him in that way. And then I said, yes, of course. And then other teachers that he had less problems with than with me would say, well, but he's very spiritual. And I thought, yeah, he is. And that was the only thing that mattered in the end, So.
Wow, beautiful. I think that's what's so amazing about EFL teachers, is looking at things from that sort of higher perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And also looking at yourself, and also just develop a lot of intuition for energy. And you don't work with egos, you work with energy. And whether the ego is the ego of a child or of an adult, you work with energy, and you do what you can to change the energy when it's heavy, And I was still impressed that sometimes you do the unexpected. That was one of the things that they wrote in the EFL manual that I had. You can open the window, you can put on a clown's nose, you can do the unexpected as long as the energy changes. And when the energy changes, then something opens up again, and you can start, normal communication again, constructive communication again.